Are you seeking fulfillment for your life? Do you want freedom from fear? That's why we're here. Welcome to Jesus 101, introducing you to the real Jesus. And now, here's your host, Elizabeth Talbot.
Welcome to Jesus 101. Today we're going to discuss why is it that we should not fear. Do you know that the command do not fear is the one most often told to us by God? It's the one that actually shows up in every book of the Bible in one way or another. Do not fear, do not fear. And the reason why we should not fear is the presence of God. He says, because I am with you. So it doesn't say don't fear because it's not difficult. It doesn't say don't fear because there's no cause to be fearful. It doesn't say don't fear because, well, everything is going to be okay. No. It says do not fear, for I am with you. And the presence of God becomes the number one and most important promise for human beings from the beginning of the Bible to the end of the Bible. Sometimes we will not get deliverance from something we were hoping we would. But the presence of God is always promised to us. I have a beautiful little bike here. And I'm going to tell you why. I love bicycles. And there's a reason why I do. When I was a little girl, something happened to me in a bicycle that showed me the value of the presence of God in my life. My father was an evangelist, and we used to move every 6 months somewhere. The first 2 months, but I was 4 years old. We would go to a new place, a new town, talk to the authorities of the town, find a field to put the big tent, evangelistic tent. And then we would start the meetings for another 2 months. And then every night for those 2 months. And at the end of those 2 months, we would stay another 2 months, find a new place, rent a place, establish a church, find a new pastor, and then do it all over again and move. So in the first 10 years of my life, we moved many more times than years because we were moving constantly. One day, we were in a little town called Huatrache. This is in the Patagonia in Argentina, in the state of La Pampa. And there was not much for me to do there. As a matter of fact, we lived in a home that was so small that my parents had to, go down a bit at the door to be able to get in. It was made of mud. That's when I got asthma, because I have asthma until today. And I got it in that little town. So one day my mom says, Lisi, I have good news for you. I'm going to borrow a bicycle, a little bicycle so that, we can go out and have fun today. But the bicycle was too big for me to ride. I was a little girl and I knew how to ride a bicycle, but only the ones that had the wheels on the side. So she borrowed an adult bicycle. And so I sat right here in the seat. She put pillows here, and so I sat there. And she, of course, sat in the main seat. And we started out in our journey, in the beautiful journey that we were going to do that day. It was the most exciting thing I had done in the last, year or so. So I was quite excited. Very soon we were far away from town. We were in the wheat fields of La Pampa, and I was enjoying myself. And the path started getting a little rough. And so my mother said, Lisi, that's my nickname, straighten up, you're going to fall from the seat. And so I did straighten up. And in the moment I did straighten up, I started crying with the cry of pain, not with the cry of a child that is just crying because wants something. This was a painful cry, and my mother didn't know what was happening. So she got off the bike and said, what's wrong? And I couldn't talk because I was in such pain. So I kept pointing to my feet. And she said, I don't see anything wrong. And I kept pointing to my feet. So I had socks all the way to my knees. And she took the sock off. And along with the sock half of my foot came out with the sock. You see, when she had told me to straighten up, I had put my little legs inside the ongoing wheel. And the wheel had chopped off half of my foot. And I remember, I think your brain takes photos of moments in which you are in an emergency. And I still have that photo in my mind of looking at my own foot and seeing the white bone of where the heel used to be. At that moment, I thought I was going to die. As a matter of fact, I was bleeding to death. And my mother was in the middle of the fields. And she hugged me and she said this, "Do not be afraid. Mommy's here." So she sat me on the main seat of the bicycle and she grabbed the handlebars and she started running next to the bicycle all the miles back until we got to the little town where I could get help. I was such a little girl that, my foot rebuilt itself. And it rebuilt itself, and today I have a little scar right here in my heel, just a little scar that reminds me of that fateful day in which my mother saved my life by taking me back to town. It was a strength, I'm sure, that came from above because she had to, run many miles to get help. But just the assurance of her presence, don't be afraid, Mommy's here, is all I needed to know, even though I was in terrible pain and it looked like I was dying. It took several months for my foot to be back to normal, but it didn't matter because now I was safe. And guess what? My mother was with me throughout the whole thing. Moms and dads are supposed to teach our children that God is always there with us. Sometimes because maybe we were taught that way, we use God and the presence of God as a punishment. We say, don't go in that place because the angels cannot go with you. Don't go there because God will not go with you. Well, the God that I believe in and the one that I believe the scriptures talk about is the God who is desperate for us. And when we are lost, He's even more desperate for us, like the shepherd who goes after the sheep that got lost. So never tell your children, if your room is not tidy, if it's not nice or clean, the angels will not be here. Because the presence of God is the greatest promise that we have in the Bible. At all times, no matter what the problem is, God is with us. He was with us at the beginning in Genesis. He was with us when we fell. He was with us when we became handicapped. He was with us when we became kidnapped. He was with us and He is with us and He will be with us. God with us is the constant promise that we find in the scriptures from beginning to end. So today we're going to look at a situation that happened to one of the prophets of God, and it's in 2 Kings chapter 6. Now this is a funny situation and I decided to draw it for you so that we have a visualization of what's going to happen here. So here we have a situation. It's kind of funny the way it's narrated. Let me tell you what it is. 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 8. The king of Aram, the king of Aram was giving trouble to Israel, was warring against Israel. And he counseled with his servants, saying, in such and such a place shall be my camp. Now the men of God sent word to the king of Israel, saying, beware that you do not pass this place. Because the prophet Elisha knew what they were talking about. So he would tell the king, don't go there, don't go here. So one day the king of Aram gets very frustrated. He says, how come every time I'm going to go after the king of Israel, somebody tells him about it? Which one of you is our traitor? Says the king of Aram. And this man answered to him and said, no, king, this is not what's going on. Let me read on verse 11. I am in 2 Kings 6:11. The heart of the king of Aram was enraged over this thing, that they always knew what he was about to do. And he called his servants and said to them, will you tell me which of us is for the king of Israel? Because every time I'm planning to go after the king, you guys, I don't know how, but the king of Israel knows about it. Which one of you is telling? And one of the men said, no, my lord, verse 12. Elisha, the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. Oh, Elisha is like a fly in the wall of your bedroom, king of Aram. So no matter what you say and what you're going to do, the prophet that has the gift of prophecy, he knows what you're going to do. So he tells the king. So they decide to go and take Elisha. So this person here with our little garment is going to be Elisha for today, okay? So they decide to go, and the army of the king of Aram surrounds the prophet Elisha. I think it's so funny that they just discuss the fact that Elisha always knows where they're going to be, and they think they're going to catch him by surprise. He has a gift of prophecy. How do they think he's not going to know they're coming? Well, maybe the gift of prophecy is going to fail this time. I don't know what they're thinking. Verse 13. So he said, go and see where he is, that I may send and take him. And it was told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. So he sent horses and chariots and a great army. Of course, I didn't have enough time to do the horses and the chariots and the great army. So all these little soldiers here, that's the great army of the king of Aram. And they surround the prophet of the Lord, Elisha. Now, Elisha has a servant, a person that is with him, that helps him, an attendant. So let me read this, what happens next. Verse 13. So he said, go and see where he is, and I may send and take him. And it was said to him, he is in Dothan. And he sent horses and chariots and a great army there. And they came by night and surrounded the city. Now when the attendant of the man of God had risen early in the morning, because Elisha had another person with him, his attendant. So when the attendant woke up in the morning, he looked out the window, and behold, an army with horses and chariots was circling the city. See, you can imagine Elisha is sleeping. You know, he has a gift of prophecy. I'm sure he knew they were coming, but he's sleeping. But his servant wakes up. His servant says, oh, you know, the army has surrounded us. And behold, an army with horses and chariots was circling the city. And his servant said to him, alas, my master, what shall we do? I like the word alas, because we don't know really what it means. It's almost like, you know, alas, woo, behold, what are we going to do? Alas, my master, what are we going to do? Because he sees everybody around the prophet. He gets nervous. He gets anxious. And the prophet Elisha seems to be so calm. You know, he's so calm. And he says something very strange to him. Do not fear. Don't forget that this statement, do not fear, is so often used in the Bible. Obviously, we are very fearful people, and God knows that, because he's constantly saying, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Why? Because God is with us. Well, here the prophet says, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Do not fear, my dear attendant, because those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And I can imagine the servant looking around. Are you talking to me? Because, you know, it's you and me and you and me. And I keep counting, and we are two. And look at this army that is around us. And Elisha says, don't worry, there's a lot more with us. The attendant is not seen, because faith is seeing the unseen, and he's not seen. So Elisha will do a prayer, a very interesting prayer. And he says to God, can you please open the eyes of my attendant? You know, he's so anxious. He's having a hard time. Would you please open the eyes, his physical eyes, so that he may see what I already know in my spiritual eyes? Could you please open the eyes of my servant? And at that moment, we are told, something happened. We are told that, I love this story. Elisha prayed and said, verse 17, "O Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see." And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of the horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. All of a sudden, the situation changed. It was just the prophet Elisha and his attendant and the whole army around them. And all of a sudden, Elisha says, "Lord, please open his eyes." And when he opened his eyes, he saw a whole different reality. He saw all the army of heaven that was surrounding this army. He looked and the mountains were full of chariots with angels and horses, and these were there all the time. He just had not seen it. And now the picture changes, doesn't it? Because, of course, when we think we're by ourselves, it's a very scary thing. We have just two of us. It's just you and your husband in this situation, you and your kid, you and your professor, you and your boss. And it's a scary thing. It looks like you're by yourself and you're surrounded by circumstances that are beyond your control. And faith says, no. But you see, don't be afraid. Why not? Well, because God is with us. His presence is always with us. But I don't see it. And in this case, the prophet said, "Could you please open his eyes so that he can see what I already know?" And all these angels, the chariots, the horses, thousands upon thousands in the mountains. And this army looked very, very little tiny when compared with the army of the Lord. Well, then the attendant wasn't afraid anymore, of course. When you have a different perception of reality, you're not afraid anymore. Wouldn't it be great if we could also always have that assurance, even though we are not seeing? Jesus gave a blessing in the Gospel of John, chapter 20, verse 29. "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed." So here we have what happens next. Verse 18, when they came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, "Strike these people with blindness, I pray." It's a very interesting and paradoxical prayer, because first he prays that his attendants' eyes may be opened, and then he prays that the soldiers' eyes may be closed. So, strike the people with blindness, I pray, and God struck them with blindness. And so Elisha said, "Okay, I'm going to take you somewhere." And so the whole army followed Elisha without knowing. They were blind at that moment. And Samaria was about 11 miles from Dothan, and Samaria was the capital of the kingdom of North Israel. Verse 20, when they had come into Samaria, Elisha took them to Samaria. Elisha said, "Oh Lord, open the eyes of this man that they may see." And the Lord opened the eyes, and they found themselves in the middle of the capital of Israel. And the king of Israel said, "My father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them?" Twice. It's very interesting, like a little boy. "Shall I kill them? Shall I kill them?" And Elisha said, "No, you had nothing to do with this. Why are you going to kill them? This was the Lord's doing. Do a great feast for them and feed them and teach them the way God deals with people." And so they did a great feast and they left. And we are told here that the Arameans didn't bother Israel for a while. Many years go by, and another prophet is sent with exactly the same message. And guess what? Once again, Israel is fighting the king of Aram. The same people, many hundreds of years later. They're still fighting the king of Aram. And once again, they get afraid. And the king of Israel is so afraid that he's trembling. Let me read it to you, Isaiah chapter 7. That the king of Aram was fighting, and they were waging war against Jerusalem. Verse 2. It was reported to the house of David. House of David means the southern kingdom. And saying, "The Arameans have camp in Ephraim." And his heart and the heart of his people shook as the trees of the forest shake with the winds. Have you ever been so afraid that you're shaking like the leaves of the trees in the forest? And then the Lord sent Isaiah, very similar to what he had done with Elisha. And he says, "Go tell the king, don't not be afraid." So in verse 3, Isaiah finds the king, and we're told he's in the upper pool, which is a very interesting comment because Jerusalem did not have a natural resource of water. So when they were going to be in a siege, the first thing the king had to see if there was enough water in the upper pool for them to drink and to use while they were in siege. So they found the king up there in the conduit of the upper pool. And he said to him, Isaiah, take care and be calm. Have no fear, because I am with you. And the king said, no, I already have a plan. And God said, come on, I'm with you. Ask me for any sign that I am with you. Ask me for a sign of my presence, and I'll give it to you so that you never doubt that I am with you. And the king, you can read this in verse 10, 11, and 12. The Lord spoke against to Ahaz, saying, ask a sign for yourself from the Lord your God. Make it deep as Sheol or high as heaven. But Ahaz said, no, I will not ask anything of the Lord. Then the Lord said, I will give you a sign, and this will be a sign. Verse 14. The Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she shall call him, his name will be Emmanuel. God said to the king of Israel, okay, you don't want any sign? A baby will be born. A baby whose name is Emmanuel. Every time you see this baby, and we don't know who this baby was, if it was a child of Isaiah or a child of the king, we only know that God said, I'm going to give you a very tangible sign that every time that you see this child, you will remember, Emmanuel, Emmanuel, God is with us. Emmanuel. El means God, Nu means us. Ima means with. With us, God. So that every time that the king saw this child, whoever that child would be, he would remember, God is with us, God is with us. See, what happened was that the king had decided to ask for help to the Assyrians. And eventually Assyria will take over the northern kingdom. But at that time, the Assyrians will actually help the southern kingdom of Israel. And he says, this baby is not going to be old enough to even know what is good and evil. And already Assyria would have taken over because you didn't trust that the presence of God was with you. Can you imagine a baby named God with us? Every time you're going to change this baby, okay, so let's say you're going to change the diapers of this baby. You're going to say, okay, God is with us. Don't cry. God is with us. Every day, whatever you did with this child, whether it was change a diaper or feed the child, you were saying constantly the same thing. You were saying, God is with us. God is with us. You fed the child. God is with us. What does God have to do so that we will remember God is with us? Why is it so hard when we are looking at difficulties, like in the time of Elisha and in the time of Isaiah, that we have a hard time saying, God is with us. Just because we are in trouble, that doesn't mean God is not with us. This little baby forever reminded everyone, God is with us. God wants you to live with that assurance. But, faith is like a pair of glasses. Faith is the ability to see the unseen, is the ability to know that there is a host of angels in the mountain. The ability to know that God knows your needs. The ability to know that He knows everything about you. And that the reality you see is not the most profound or real of all of both realities. There are two realities, the one you see and the one you don't see. And so here is the one you see. This is the one you don't see. It's like faith is a pair of glasses. And you put this pair of glasses and you see something different. Many years ago, this three-dimensional puzzles came up. I don't know if you remember that, where you were to focus in this weird-looking picture. And then all of a sudden your eyes got in the right position and you would see another reality inside that picture, a three-dimensional reality. I I went through a lot because I couldn't focus. I couldn't see. Everybody kept seeing, oh, we see a bird and trees, and I couldn't see a thing. Until one day, somebody took the time to teach me. There was a glass on top of the photo, and they said, you got to look beyond the glass, and they taught me. And all of a sudden, I saw it. And I'm never going to forget it. It was like getting into this other reality that I had not seen, even though I had been staring at the same picture for weeks. Well, faith is putting those glasses on that says, oh, so God was with us all this time. So there was an army in the mountains. So it was the child Emmanuel. Well, Matthew says, okay, I'm going to tell you who is the real Emmanuel. And of all the gospel writers, he's the only one who applies the prophecy that Isaiah gave King Ahaz in Isaiah 7:14. He applies it to Jesus. Chapter 1 of Matthew, verse 23, it says that Jesus would be born. Let's read verse 22. All this took place to fulfill what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall be with child, and shall bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which translated means God with us. Emmanuel, Ima with, Nu us, El God. But this Emmanuel, Jesus, is the same one who cried out on the cross, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. This means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Isn't it paradoxical that God with us is the one who asked God, why are you not with me? Isn't it paradoxical that Emmanuel, this El of Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? This El is the same El as in Emmanuel, because it means God. And here we have Emmanuel hanging on a cross, saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? This paradox of Emmanuel being forsaken, God with us, saying, why are you not with me, is the paradox that teaches us that, yes, the wages of sin is death, but God took upon himself this death, and he was abandoned in our place, so that you may never be. There is nothing, absolutely nothing you can do in this life that will prevent God from going after you, because God is with us. In the moment you want to see by faith what he has accomplished, you will see it because of this. So don't forget, faith is the certainty of things not seen. I hope you put your glasses on.